Welcome to the 226 FBC Boerne Next Gen podcast, where we want to have candid conversations and offer practical tools for those raising the next generation. We believe that parents are called by God to be the primary disciple makers in their kids' lives, and we know that can be a daunting task. The 226 podcast aims to help you by providing biblical insights and gospel-centered resources that will help you raise the next generation living in your home to know, love, and walk with Christ. Let's jump into this week's 226. Well, hey guys, thanks for joining us today. This is Daniel here with Garrett and Teresa. What's up, guys?
We're doing great. How are you, Teresa?
I'm doing great, Garrett. What do you want to talk about today? Football, coffee.
I've had so many cups of coffee that I'm hoping I can make it to the end of this podcast. It's a Thursday morning, so, we were here till, 9:30 last night.
I could have coffee, too.
Yeah, I don't think you can.
Nobody that listens to this podcast wants Teresa to have coffee before.
I don't know what you're trying to say. What are you alluding to? I
am saying that you have so many good ideas and so much wisdom to give that it just all comes out when you have coffee,
really?
and it's hard to soak it up.
I think I should have coffee.
No, because we just little drips so that I got to take notes.
Decaf is little drips.
Yeah. Look, y'all, decaf for Teresa is like calf for the rest of us. It does things to her.
I think earlier you said I have ADHD. That's not very nice.
I don't remember saying that at all. Daniel, it's not on the podcast, so it didn't happen.
You're throwing me in the middle of this already.
I know.
I did watch as we were getting set up, like Garrett's eyes rolled back in his head as Teresa just hit him with full strength this morning with just random ideas.
I wanted to talk about couponing before the podcast. He wasn't interested.
Look, we were planning what we were going to talk about on this podcast on the way down, and I was 3 words in, and then somehow we were on iPad Pros from Amazon. I don't know how we got there.
It was Amazon Deal Day yesterday. Come on.
I did not know that it was Amazon Deal Day. I felt like I kind of missed out.
Wow, you did.
So one of the things I'm realizing, I've got to teach Garrett how to speak Teresa.
Yeah, Daniel's kind of caught on.
Do they have that on Google Translate?
Is that an option? It's made him a better person, a better leader.
It's kind of fun.
Because he can follow. Oh, you're here now. Great.
Yeah, I just go with it. It's like wherever this ride's going, I'm with it. And it's going to be fun, but.
It's parenting that did it to me. I realized that in parenting, I only have about 15 minutes ever. Right, when I had kids. And so whatever I got to have happen in 15 minutes. So it's got to be, I've got 15 minutes to download our whole life to my husband when he gets home, and that's it. So it's all over the board, done, but I'm done in 15.
Shotgun blast. I love it.
It's kind of like that.
I love it. Good stuff. Well,
Plus, I know you love it, so I kind of continue it.
I do my best. We track. We try. I got, a solid 1 of 15 minutes probably.
Well, hey, that's better than yesterday.
5 ideas in, 30 seconds in, I kind of
exactly.
went into meltdown.
Well, I have to do something because you guys talk about football, and that's kind of not my thing. But was Tennessee kind of doing good right now, Daniel?
Ooh,
we were.
I wasn't going to go there.
Oh, I heard people talk about it on the stage or something. So.
Yeah, we were, but. We'll see. We'll see what happens this Saturday. This Saturday will be critical.
That usually means they're not doing well.
I'm kind of being quiet about it right now.
He's not eating any pork this week. No pig, anything for some reason. It's not
really.
This is probably telling y'all when we're shooting this podcast. So.
That's right. Tennessee lost to Arkansas.
Sorry.
It was bad.
Yeah. But Alabama lost too, so to Vanderbilt. It could be worse.
It's a little bit of a salve to the wound, but not much. Not much.
Well, in your sake, Daniel,
could we transition?
We can talk about something else.
Yeah, I'd really like to before I get depressed and don't want to talk about it.
We need Happy Daniel for the rest of the podcast.
That's right. You want Happy Daniel. Well, guys, we are back now this is episode 2 of our podcast, the 226 Next Gen. And we last week started talking about, as we introduced our team, this idea of a roadmap, a next gen roadmap that is going to be a tool for you as parents to use as you think about discipling your kids and the different stages of their development. And so we're going to begin unpacking that in future episodes with each of the stages, with practical resources and tips and ways to use the roadmap and how we as a church want to come alongside you in that. But we think there's something really important that we need to talk about before we start diving into specific stages in the roadmap. And it's this big idea right here, that if it's going to be in your kids, it has to be in you. And that statement seems to be pretty self-explanatory, but I think it would be good to take a minute and just define what we mean by that statement. So guys, I want to hear your thoughts for a minute when we say something like, if it's going to be in them, it's got to be in you. Garrett, kick us off. When you hear that statement, what do you think it means?
Yeah, I think about my own life. The time I've seen this, I think about, things that let me backtrack. So raising a kid will show you very quickly any of your deficiencies, right? Like if I'm trying to teach my kid about patience, I realize how impatient I am. And I think one thing that I see in student ministry a lot of times, I don't even think it's not just student ministry, it's kids ministry, is parents, myself included, want what's best for their children. And you see a lot of times that a parent will come and drop their kid off at church or try to get them involved for, in a youth group or in a church because, we want what's best for them. Like I want them to have some spirituality. However, you just want it for them. And I don't think I have ever seen it outside of God's sovereign grace be an effective strategy for, hey, I want this for them, but I'm not going to have any of it myself. And so the idea is that it's going to be really hard to parent a child well if you're not a child of God yourself.
That's right. It's good. Teresa, what do you think?
Well, I think obviously it's interesting as a parent. It is true. Everything that they do, they're typically imitating you, right? And so I know recently Lifeway did a survey or a study to say what is, for parents, grown adults now that are actively pursuing their faith and Christ followers, what was the number one thing that made that impact? And there was a whole list of things, do they go to private school or are they homeschooled? Do they go to public school? None of that showed up in the survey. It really wasn't whether they attended church. It was on the survey, but it wasn't at the top. The number one thing was reading their Bible together as a family. Oh, wow. Having that intentional time was the number one difference and the only commonality between the ones that decided to be faithful followers of Jesus as adults. And then, of course, going to church is a really big start, right, for a lot of reasons. Y'all could give me a lot of theology reasons for sure as to why it would be a good thing. But I'm a product of the opposite, right? So I didn't have parents that went to church. And I always tell kids, you're like 12 years ahead of me. I missed like the first 12 years of my life learning about Jesus, so I had to catch up. But I find that's really the number one thing, and the statistics from Lifeway of kids who become active Christ followers as adults, again, another modeling. It is not the end all, but it is important, is parents taking their kids to church and going to church with them. And the statistics show that if mom and dad went to church, there's a 72% of those kids will become active Christ followers. If mom goes to church and dad doesn't go with them, it will be 15%. Now, if dad goes to church with them and mom doesn't go, this is kind of an unfair statistic as a mom, I'm going to say it, but it shows the desire and the need for male leadership in the home, spiritual. It's 55%.
Wow.
And then if neither mom or dad go to church, there's less than 6% chance that those kids are going to become active Christ followers as adults. So that's definitely one of the important steps, I think, to show that, but it is not the end all. I think Garrett has some ideas of other things. Of course, we're talking about being imitators, and our kids are imitating us. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so to kind of like summarize, I think what we're saying here is, one, if you want your child to have a relationship with God, the most crucial thing you can do in fostering that is having a relationship with God by yourself, like following Jesus, placing your faith in him, making him king. Like statistics show, if you want it for them, you yourself have to have it. Like you can't disciple someone if you yourself is not a disciple. You can word it a million ways, but the point there is that. And then part of that is the education piece of like, I can't teach my child the Bible if I don't know the Bible. And we're not saying that you have to be an expert here. In fact, sometimes
theology.
Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be authentic and say, hey, you know what? I have this all the time. Kids will come and ask me theology questions and whatnot. And no matter how much schooling you do, some 12-year-old is going to find a way to ask you something that you have no idea about. Like, what about, you think Adam had a belly button? Like, I don't know, dog. I don't know. I'll be the first thing I ask when I get to heaven. But they always find something that you don't know. And the best thing you can do sometimes is say, you know what? I don't know. Because they can smell through fakeness. Like this generation more than anything. Like they have got a baloney meter like no other. And so just being authentic to say, hey, I don't know, but we're going to find this out together. But so there's that education piece. And then kind of what you hit on too is there's the modeling piece. And Daniel and I were talking about this, and we were actually all talking about this at a conference we were at earlier this week, is that more than ever, you are seeing this deconstruction. I'm doing air quotes because we don't have video. And you're seeing people walk away from the church. And that's been thrown to a million different reasons. You've got people spending insane amounts of money and time trying to figure out why. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, but my thought and where I'm at, and I've been thinking through this the last few days, is I don't think that we are dealing with this logical, rational atheism of the 1990s. Like, I don't have 8-year-olds walking around quoting Richard Dawkins. Like, that's just not what we're dealing with right now.
No.
In fact, this generation is more spiritual than ever. I mean, you go on TikTok and you got people like praying to rocks and stuff. It's like, yeah, but God of the universe, but yeah, or crystals, right? Perfect. But they're more spiritual than ever. And so you're asking, well, why in the world are they walking away from the faith in droves? And I think that is because this generation has been fed a counterfeit version of what it means to follow Jesus. They've had parents, they've had the generations before them who have kind of prescribed to this cultural, watered down Christianity. And they look around at their parents and they say, look, I don't have a problem believing in God, but why would I want to believe in that one?
Yeah.
Right? Because the God my parents follow, that Jesus just gives them a bunch of rules and doesn't change their life. They go to church on Wednesday and Sunday, which is very important. Hear me say that. But then they go home and dad gets drunk and mom goes out and they don't really talk to me and they spend all their money on all this stuff. And I only see Jesus on Wednesdays and Sundays. So why in the world would I just add more rules to my life when there's no benefit or value? And now we as believers know there's immense value. But if the version that you are modeling is just this cultural Christianity, this what's called like moral therapeutic deism, like I just pull Jesus out of my pocket when I need some help and then I put him back away. Your kids don't want that. They're tired of playing church. And so I think at this point, I feel like we've talked about the negatives a whole lot and kind of beaten down on that. And I'm sure our prayer is not to put this undue burden on anybody. And if you're listening and you realize, hey, like that's the camp I'm in, there is grace and mercy and forgiveness and hope. If you are still breathing, if your child is still breathing, there is no too far gone or it's too late. And so, Daniel, I want to hear your expertise on this. Obviously, you've been doing family ministry for a long time, and a long time. Sorry, he chuckled when I said that.
That was a subtle dig at my age.
Football and that age thing, all in one podcast.
All in one podcast. So.
Yeah, sorry.
It's all right.
Love
wisdom,
buddy.
Solomon. Wisdom.
Yeah, there's a wisdom. Like, you know, the great. Never mind.
Go ahead. The gray hair.
Yeah. It's a crown of honor.
Crown of wisdom.
Yeah,
it is.
So, that being said, we've talked a lot about the importance of it, right? Like, hey, these are some damaging things that can happen if you don't bring your faith home, if you don't model it. But what does that actually look like? Because it's one thing to like know better, but it's another thing to know how to do better. And so what in your expertise in your years have you seen that, like, what does it look like as a parent to actually like model that for their kids?
Yeah, well, I mean, so everything we've talked about so far, like just the baseline thing, right, is just this recognition that I've got to prioritize faith, my faith, right? It's got to be personal in me, and I've got to prioritize it. And I think if you hear nothing else today, that is probably the main thing that you could start to just process and use to filter, like what you do in your life, all the different buckets, work, like social, free time activities, home life, every little piece of time, thing that gets into your time, takes part of your time throughout the day. How much is your faith part of that? How real is your faith in each of those things, right? So what we're saying is just start prioritizing it. I mean, and so yes, prioritizing it means we're going to make church a priority in our home. Over the years, watching students grow up, it's gotten easier and easier for me to see, right? The families that say, we'll go to church when we don't have something else to do on a Sunday, right? I could pretty much tell you that child that grows up with that kind of mentality, once they're out of high school and they're on their own, they're not going. Because church was just what we did when there wasn't anything else to do growing up. And so sometimes it's hard decisions. It's like, no, we may have to say no to another weekend tournament or, you know, we're going to have to come back on Saturday night so that we can be in church on Sunday morning. Like, things like that matter because what you're expressing to your kids is this is valuable. So that is one of those. Is like our faith has got to be a priority in how we prioritize being connected to the body of Christ. But then it's got to be a priority in all of the other areas of our life too. And I think what I've seen is, as it is, the knowledge begins to come. If it's a priority, you're going to spend more time in the Word of God. You're going to start to learn things that you can then teach your children about God's Word. But the thing that you teach them every day is just how much of a priority it is.
Yeah, and your priorities will tell on you, right? Like, your priorities will tell you so much. And not your stated priorities, but your lived priorities. That's right. Meaning if we had screen time for life, like if somebody ever one day invents that, and I could look at, hey, I've spent this much time doing this or this much time doing this, or when there's a conflict, this is what wins every single time. You are like, I love how you put it, like, you are telling your kids what is valuable, whether you realize it or not, and they pay attention.
Like where your treasure is. Yeah,
it's where your treasure is, right? But you're telling them that, hey, that weekend tournament, has more value than, what other things we can do. And I want to say that, even as I was saying that, like, I want to be gracious in that and understand, like, guys, y'all have a lot pulling at you as families now more than ever. And I truly believe there is a spiritual element to that. I don't think it's accidental that sports and band and all the things are encroaching on weekends. And so I just want to back up and say, like, there is a lot of grace for us figuring this out, and there is value in those things. But what we're really trying to say is that at the end of the day, when your child stands before the Lord, he's not going to ask about their GPA. He's not going to ask about their batting average. He's not going to pull up their huddle film. He's going to ask, hey, why should I let you in? And ultimately, the only answer that's sufficient is, well, because of what you did for me, Jesus. And so...
Well, yeah, and the only thing that's going to satisfy the deepest longing of their hearts, your kids' hearts, as they mature and as they get out from under your umbrella and they begin to, live life, take ownership of their own lives as adults, right? I mean, the thing that is really going to go with them is their walk with the Lord, right? I mean, that's the thing that's going to, inform in the best way their identity, right? And if their identity's gotten wrapped up in other things because we've prioritized other things over our walk with the Lord, right, then there's going to have to be this season of, like, unlearning. My identity can't be wrapped up in this or that. And then going to have to walk through that painful journey as an adult of figuring out, who am I, and where is my identity? Where is my value? All of those things.
And I see kids crash into that wall all the time,
and they don't even know it's coming. Do they?
Yeah, because let's be realistic. A small fraction of a small fraction is going to play D1 sports, and a small fraction of a small fraction of that is going to play professional sports, and 100% of those guys are going to retire one day. And so eventually you're going to hang up those cleats. You're going to put away that instrument, and you got to find out, who in the world am I? Because I built the first 20 years of my life off of trying to run a football past a line. And I'm not saying that's bad, but if that's their whole identity, that's why you see kids go to college and bail on the church and just turn to medication and medication in all forms, Netflix, social media, Instagram, relationships. Like, they just self-medicate this pain and this feeling of lacking.
And so what we're saying is, even, like, there's value in sports, there's value in band and dance and all the different things that we do. Like, God gives us those gifts and those abilities. There's value in doing them. But as parents, we have a unique opportunity that while they're working hard to excel in extracurricular things, for us to constantly be reminding them there's something that's even more important.
Yes. And I think one of the best ways I've ever heard this put, and it wasn't even in this context, but Matt Chandler has said this multiple times. And a lot of times we think about a priority list. And,
I'm going to start keeping a little tally of Garrett,
how many times
of different people. Chandler, Comer, JP. Like, I'm just going to start tallying.
Ben Stewart. You got to be a learner, man.
When they start popping into the podcast.
That's my generation.
So we got one for Chandler so far.
There you go. That's my generation of Pipers and Alistair Beggs and all the guys. So,
I've never heard you recite Piper before.
No,
that's not my
He's
generation.
cracking on me.
Say,
That's
you're
my
cracking on him?
generation.
I was, it's great. I love Piper. I mean, the seashell, dude, get you run through a wall every single time. Come on, if you know it. But that being said, he speaks to it and it just clicks so much. And this resonates with students as well. As a lot of times we think that God is number one on the priority list. Really, God's the paper that the priority list is written on. And so he's not just number one priority that just trumps everything else. Obviously, he is the number one priority, like hear what I'm saying here. But if he is the paper that the list is written on, he informs every single one of those things. So your relationship with Jesus informs how you play sports, realizing that could be a mission field. Mm-hmm. Man, I got to see somebody recently from, I'll speak vaguely because I don't want to like put anything out there that people want to share themselves, but somebody in just like a hobby that I have that got saved recently. And that was through this girl's connection. And it was just something that she was using as a ministry opportunity. And like God uses those things, right? But now your relationship with Jesus informs how you do school, how you spend your free time. Like that is that breaking down of that compartmentalization of Jesus isn't just confined to Wednesdays and Sundays, but he's on the baseball field, right? Or your relationship with him should shine through on the baseball field and the court and the band hall and the extracurriculars and the XYZ. And so as we close, do you want to just talk about a few really, really practical things? Because if you're wired like I am, like I like to have one or two things like, hey, I'm listening to this on my way into work. I'm super convicted now. I need to get my stuff together. Like, what am I going to do tonight to start this? Just start somewhere.
Yeah, so I'm going to pitch it to Teresa for a minute.
Yeah, well, just for a second, I think the Bible reading thing is very intimidating for parents, right? They're like, I don't know the Bible that well. I'm uncomfortable with it. And then I had a friend who, somebody asked him, I just happened to be there. He said, how did you get your kids to start reading their Bibles? Did you like make it mandatory, like a sticker chart thing that they had to read their Bibles? And he goes, no, we didn't do that. And they're like, well, how did you do it? He goes, to be honest with you, he said, we read the Bible all the time. Like I would have my own quiet time and my kids would see me. It was in public. They would see me and they would see mom reading her Bible separately. And all of a sudden they got to an age and my one son said, I went in his room, he's reading his Bible. He goes, well, I mean, I see you reading your Bible all the time. I probably need to read mine. And then the daughter did the same thing, and it was just literally being faithful and reading it, and the kids saw that and said, oh, this really isn't that hard. And I'll be honest with you, I was on the road all the time. I worked full-time with my kids, and we used the car time as a time to listen to the Bible, to talk about Scripture in everyday life. So we'll talk in future episodes about some maybe practical tips to do, but don't be intimidated. It's really not that hard. I promise you, if you're faithful, God will be faithful to you, and He'll help you. So
and there's so many great tools now.
There really are.
Of Bible engagement, like how to understand it, to understand what you're reading, different methods of Bible study. Like there are so many out there, and we'll talk about more of those in the future. But just start.
Yeah, like just start somewhere, right?
Right.
So some of the practical things. Then I want to let's think through that. Like, how do we make faith a priority in our lives and then in our family, right? Personal and then family. So, Teresa, kick us off. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm a huge 7 Habits Covey person from my business background.
Hey, Teresa gets a mark for that one.
Whoop, whoop.
Yeah, we're marking
that'll
down
be
the other thing. Yep, Covey,
we don't
Covey
plagiarize
reference.
here, okay?
I don't use them for
We
my
are academically
spiritual background, but I use them for more systems and organizational.
We are academically honest here. We cite our sources.
And if you're, I always say, look at what's the end result. What do you want? You want your child to be an adult who's actively growing and following their faith and loving Jesus. So if I want that, what am I going to do? So obviously you want to be reading your Bible. You want to be attending church. You want to be praying. Prayer's really hard. I noticed that in kids ministry, a lot of kids aren't reading their Bibles because they tell me they're honest, and it's not a judgment to parents. I get that. But they don't know how to pray, and they're very uncomfortable praying. And so spend time praying with them. It doesn't have to be hard. I mean, we do crazy stuff still with 20-year-olds with popsicle sticks in a jar. It's your turn to pray. I don't know what we're going to pray, and we have company over. You pull the stick out. Oh, I'm praying for this. Okay. And then we go around. I mean, there's just all kinds of really simple things. Make it simple. Don't make it a big deal. And the bigger deal is having spiritual conversation. You know, when something bad happens, to them, to you, or to someone else, being able to talk that through. I have 20-year-olds now, and so they were talking, I will not give you the reference exactly, but they were talking to me yesterday about a very, in the music industry, somebody who really has everything from the world's view, that he should be the happiest person in the world, right? And he's made a lot of really bad choices. And they're just, befuddled, like, why? Why? And I said, because God created in you a desire to have a relationship with him, and you can fill it with all the whatevers you want. It will never be full until you're walking with him. And that's what we see, whether it be medication, sports, whatever. We're trying to find this happiness that only comes from God. And they'll try everything and anything. And in the world's view, this guy should have it all, down pat. And the reality is he's as struggling and lost as a homeless man on the streets because he doesn't have Jesus. Mm-hmm. And his life shows that he doesn't have the fruits of it. And so therefore he walks in sin.
Yeah. That's a perfect way to say, hey, we're just talking. I'm talking to my kids.
Yeah.
And they bring up something that's on their mind. And I look for ways to turn that
into
a moment, for a spiritual conversation, to teach them something about the character of God and about my need for him, right? Yeah. I mean, it's just using the everyday stuff. That's a perfect practical way to say, if it's going to be in them, it's got to be in you, right? You're thinking spiritually.
And I can be as basic as Leighton. Garrett's little girl was here, and I have this wagon, which she really likes a lot. And I said, hey, I got to take some stuff down. Can I take her with me? And I take her in my wagon, and we walk in the parking lot. And I'm saying, hey, do you see anything here God's made? And the whole walk of the entire campus, we did the whole campus. That's why it took us so long. She kept telling me things she saw God made. Oh, Miss Teresa, God made the sun. I was like, oh, I know, it's so hot. Aren't you so glad God made the sun? God is so big, isn't he? Yeah, God is so big.
I love that.
And it's super simple. And then I never said another word. Leighton just kept telling me things she saw. Oh, there's the grass, Miss Teresa. God made the grass. I said, he did. Can you believe that? And I said, what else? Well, he made me. And so we're having this conversation. I'm doing work. And anyway, so it's not really hard, but it's a part of life, right? So I'm with her. I could have talked about anything with her, but I'm like, ooh, I've got Leighton. I'm going to see what she's got.
Perfect.
I love that. And I think the spontaneousness, we always give my mother-in-law a hard time because she's a homeschool mom, and she did such a good job about that. Of everything is a Bible lesson. Like, we're cooking rice. You see how this rice gets bigger? It's like the kingdom of God. And like everything.
I love that.
She does such an amazing job.
I need to meet her,
Mom, if you're listening, you're awesome, and thanks for raising a great daughter.
That's the 2.0 version of this podcast. That's that advanced, everybody's not.
The grain of rice. I love that. I got to meet her.
You'll grow into that.
Yeah, you'll grow into that. Yeah, and I think that's great for the spontaneous stuff. And I think for me, something that I just like personally resonate with, I don't know if this is everybody, for a lot of the structured stuff, I like to find a way to have a plan or to put stuff on autopilot. And what I mean by that, let me use a fitness analogy because that's the one Daniel expects me to use.
Check that off the list.
There's another one.
I'm waiting for you to use it on Sunday. We'll see. But if I show up to a Planet Fitness and, just try to work out or anything,
Garrett
because
would
of how
never
I'm wired,
go to Planet Fitness.
Never.
Yeah, that is how you know this is illustration. I would not darken those doors. But that I would show up and I just do arms, I just do a little bit or whatever. Like, I like going to a gym where I show up, the workout's written for me, I'm doing it with a group of people.
Intentionality.
Yeah,
Garrett?
Because there's an intentionality, there's an accountability, and it's going to force me to have a well-rounded diet. If I go and do what I don't have a plan, I'm going to do what I like. I'm going to do what I understand. And I see this so much in students if they don't have a plan when it comes to their Bible reading. And so they end up reading through Proverbs, James, and Matthew 15 times in 3 years.
Or start in Genesis, my elementary kids with friends. I'm like, oh, that's probably not where we're going to start.
Yeah. And again, there's nothing wrong. Just find somewhere to start. But for me, it's helpful to, like, I'm big on the Bible in a year plan just because I've done it this year and it's been incredible. There's a million different ones. But really just having a plan. And as you have that rhythm, it's kind of like that trellis that guides the vine, or it's, that's a well-used analogy, but it's just this guiding these rail posts that, guys, life is crazy. Parenting is crazy. I got a 2-year-old and a 7-month-old. And my 7-month-old just decided not to use his left arm half this week. And so you panic and you figure that out, and like life just gets crazy. He's fine, by the way. But having those guideposts. So for us, like, one of those rhythms is before we go to bed every night, like, I read Leighton a chapter of the Jesus Storybook Bible, and she knows it. She loves it. She looks forward to it. And you'll grow in that too. Like, that's a whole nother thing. Like, you doing this, you'll grow in your faith. Like, I've got 2 degrees from a Christian education, like Christian university. And man, I'm learning stuff from Jesus Storybook Bible, just like the way things are worded and just the simplicity to it. we were talking about like a bedtime blessing prayer,
Right.
And there's many options. That will probably be dropped later down the road because we don't have time for me to go list off all those resources. But, it's just saying a quick prayer with her in the evening, whether you want to do a liturgical type of thing, if it's the same thing every night, or if it's, hey, I'm just going to say a quick prayer, and finding what works for you. The best method is the one that you can actually do, like just finding something to start with, but then having a plan to where like, okay, this is just what we're doing. It's settled. It's decided. It's not if I have enough time.
Right. It's a
this
priority.
is going to happen. Yeah.
Because you see it in all avenues of life, right? If you decide you're going to work on your finances, you're going to work on your diet and exercise. If you don't have a plan, all of a sudden you're like November-ish and you're about to hit Thanksgiving and you're going to go, oh, man.
Yeah. Well, and
I didn't accomplish anything I thought I was going to. It really wasn't a priority. So if you don't have an intentionality and a plan, it's probably not going to happen.
And here's something that I think to kind of bring these two things together and land this plane for today. When you have a rhythm and a plan, I think that is a crucial thing, right? And you start to develop those, like, I'm going to schedule these things. We're going to do these things because I want my faith to be real. I want my kids to see it. And so I'm going to prioritize it. And so and one of the ways I'm going to prioritize it is to start to create these rhythms in life and have a plan. As you have that, the plan actually then creates what Teresa was talking about, where you just start using the everyday moments because it's in your head, right? You're thinking
you're growing
spiritually.
And learning with them.
Yeah, and so then you actually see these other more spontaneous,
one's off at college,
things.
one is about to finish high school, and
is faith.
Some of the things that
we
we did growing
that
up,
everything is written
every
on.
night there was
Right,
we read the Bible, we did Bible story time, and we did prayer time, and then we would sing. We would sit on the side of one of their beds. I mean, believe it or not, the Justices were singing. And that was something that we just did every night together. And then as they got older and they were headed off, they were in school, I got to drive them to school every morning through their elementary and middle school days. We would pray on the way to school. We would pray for their day. We would pray that they would be lights for Christ on campus, right? And so just little things like that make such a difference. And I think I did those things because I remember watching my dad growing up. Like, I would get up early in the mornings, but my dad was already up before he left for work, and he was sitting at the dining room table reading his Bible.
Right.
Every morning, I would go get his Bible off of the shelf while he was at work, and I would look through it, and it was written in, it was highlighted, it was marked, and I'm like, this is real to him. And I didn't know at the time. I just thought my dad was cool, and I wanted to look at what I saw him doing. But that stuck, right? And it became a priority for me. So, guys, what we're saying is you can do this. Right. And it just means starting. Like, just start today. And the difference it will make in the life of your child, no matter their age, is going to be significant. And it will be a crucial part of their development and yours. So hope this has been helpful for you today. Any last thoughts, guys, before we close?
I think it's great. It's going to feel awkward at first. Like, I'll be the first one to say, like, especially if you didn't grow up having it for you. I know it sounds weird to say that it would be awkward, but I just think experientially, like, I can say, like, it's kind of weird at first. You're like, okay, we're going to sit together and pray. And there's this part is like, okay, this feels kind of strange. It's worth it.
Oh, yeah.
Push through it.
The first Bible reading time you have as a family is going to feel like the weirdest thing you've ever done, right?
Or
it's going
be
to be like a middle
chaos.
school,
like kids
middle
are
school dance,
like dropping elbows on each
dance.
other, like throwing stuff everywhere. But it is worth it.
That's right.
Yeah, and have them engage with you. I mean, the reality is for us, I had really triplets, so they were the same age. And so they were very distracting. Maybe that's where I got that from. But, we would have them read portions of it or have them act it out. I mean, all of a sudden, then before you know it, they're involved, and now it has more meaning to them. So there's all kinds of ways. So just start. That's what I say. Just start. Pick a rhythm and start.
That's good. Well, guys, thanks for joining us today. Hope this has been helpful, and we will see you next time. Hey, we hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the 226 podcast. If you would like more information or additional resources, check us out at fbcboerne.org or jump on one of our social media sites where you will find other resources and tools aimed to help you with gospel-centered resources and biblical insights as you raise the next generation living in your home to know, love, and walk with Christ. We'll see you next week.